The morning sun poured golden light across the towering glass buildings of downtown Chicago, making the city look unstoppable. Employees hurried through revolving doors, carrying coffee cups and expensive dreams, while luxury cars lined the streets like symbols of power. Yet among the crowd walked a quiet single father wearing a faded blue shirt, carefully holding his little daughter's hand as if protecting the most valuable treasure in the world. People glanced at him and looked away without a second thought. None of them imagined that within the next hour, the arrogant woman who publicly called him worthless would watch her billion-dollar empire collapse before her eyes, as 40 of the world's biggest banks simultaneously froze every account connected to her company. Sometimes the richest person in a room is the one who never needs to prove it, and sometimes the greatest revenge is simply allowing the truth to arrive. Before we begin this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Soulful Tales 2 for more emotional stories that remind us why compassion will always be stronger than pride. Every weekday morning, Elias Rowan followed the same routine. He woke before sunrise, packed lunch for his 8-year-old daughter Nora, braided her curly hair after watching dozens of online tutorials, and walked her to school before heading toward the financial district. His life looked painfully ordinary. His apartment was modest, his clothes were simple, and his old sedan had crossed more than 200,000 miles. Most people assumed he struggled to survive. The truth was very different. After selling a revolutionary cybersecurity company years earlier, Elias quietly became one of the wealthiest investors in America. Instead of chasing headlines, he dedicated his fortune to charitable foundations, educational programs, and community hospitals. His wealth was hidden behind private trusts and anonymous donations because he believed generosity lost its beauty the moment it became a performance. Nora had become the center of his universe after her mother passed away from a rare illness. The grief nearly destroyed him, but raising his daughter gave him a reason to keep moving forward. Every decision he made revolved around teaching her honesty, humility, and kindness. He wanted her to grow up believing that character mattered far more than status. That was why he dressed simply, refused luxury, and never corrected strangers when they underestimated him. He believed people revealed their true nature by how they treated those they considered unimportant. Across the city stood Victoria Hensley, the celebrated founder of one of the fastest-growing financial technology corporations in the world. Magazine covers praised her brilliance, television interviews celebrated her aggressive leadership, and investors admired her relentless confidence. Behind the polished image, however, lived someone who believed success gave her permission to look down on everyone else. Employees feared disappointing her because one mistake could end a career. Partners obeyed her demands because billions of dollars depended on keeping her satisfied. She measured human worth by expensive watches, designer clothing, and luxury cars. That bright Tuesday morning, Victoria arrived at the headquarters of the International Banking Alliance, where executives from dozens of global institutions gathered for a confidential summit about financial security. Unknown to nearly everyone attending, Elias had also been invited as the anonymous architect behind the world's most advanced banking protection network, a system so sophisticated that 40 major banks depended upon it every second of every day. Only a handful of board members knew his identity because he insisted on remaining invisible. Traffic delayed Elias by several minutes after Nora accidentally left her school project in the car. He smiled, turned around, delivered the forgotten assignment, and reached the conference building carrying nothing more than a worn leather folder. As he entered the lobby, Victoria noticed him speaking politely with the receptionist. She assumed he was another maintenance worker who had wandered into an executive event. Without bothering to learn who he was, she marched across the marble floor wearing confidence like armor. In front of investors, journalists, and corporate leaders, she looked at his inexpensive clothes and quietly laughed. Then she announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear that security should remove worthless people before they embarrassed serious professionals. Cameras turned. Conversation stopped. Faces filled with awkward silence. Elias simply lowered his eyes, thanked the receptionist for her kindness, and stepped aside without responding. Nora had taught him something surprising after losing her mother. She once said that hurting people often shouted because nobody had ever listened to their hearts. Elias remembered those words every time someone insulted him. Victoria walked away feeling victorious, believing she had protected the image of the event. She never noticed several senior banking executives staring at her with growing concern after recognizing the quiet man she had humiliated. Minutes later, the conference officially began. Executives entered the massive auditorium, expecting another presentation about international finance. Victoria confidently took her reserved seat near the front, prepared to deliver the keynote address celebrating her company's expansion. The lights dimmed and the chairman approached the stage. Instead of introducing Victoria, he welcomed the mysterious visionary, responsible for protecting trillions of dollars moving through global banking systems every single day. The audience erupted into applause as Elias Rowan calmly walked onto the stage. Victoria's smile disappeared. She stared in complete disbelief while every executive rose to their feet in respect. The humble father she had dismissed as worthless stood before the world's most influential financial leaders, not as an employee but as the man whose technology defended their institutions from cyber attacks, fraud, and financial collapse. Elias never mentioned the insult. Instead, he delivered a thoughtful presentation about trust, responsibility, and the importance of treating every person with dignity because security depended upon integrity at every level. His calm voice carried far greater authority than arrogance ever could. Every sentence reflected wisdom earned through loss, resilience, and compassion. As his presentation concluded, a senior compliance director urgently approached the chairman carrying confidential documents. Overnight investigators had uncovered evidence that Victoria's corporation secretly manipulated international transactions, concealed billions in risky liabilities, and violated banking regulations across multiple countries. Because Elias's security network constantly monitored suspicious financial behavior, automated alerts had already reached 40 partner banks earlier that morning. The investigation triggered immediate emergency protocols. Within minutes, 40 international banks simultaneously froze every account connected to Victoria's corporate empire pending regulatory review. Phones rang endlessly. Trading platforms suspended activity. Investors watched billions vanish from market value before lunch. News channels interrupted, programming with breaking reports as helicopters circled financial headquarters. Victoria stood frozen while legal advisors surrounded her with expressions of panic. She desperately tried calling executives, but every conversation ended the same way. Banking access had been suspended. Credit facilities were terminated. Emergency financing disappeared. Years spent building an empire unraveled faster than she believed possible. Yet through the chaos, Elias quietly left the auditorium because it was time to pick Nora up after school. When he arrived, Nora ran into his arms carrying a drawing she had made during art class. The picture showed a father holding his daughter's hand beneath a bright sun. At the bottom she had written, "Kind people never lose." Elias smiled with tears in his eyes. That simple sentence meant more than every business award he had ever received. Over the following weeks, investigations exposed years of deception inside Victoria's corporation. Former employees courageously shared stories of intimidation, unethical practices, and impossible expectations. Regulators imposed record penalties while investors abandoned the company. Newspapers that once celebrated her success now questioned how ambition had replaced integrity. Victoria disappeared from public view. For the first time in decades, she experienced life without wealth protecting her from consequences. Meanwhile, Elias continued living exactly as before. He still prepared Nora's breakfast every morning. He still volunteered anonymously at children's hospitals. He still funded scholarships without attaching his name to buildings. Reporters repeatedly requested exclusive interviews, but he politely declined because he believed true purpose required no applause. Months later, fate arranged one final meeting. A community center hosting a charity event welcomed families from every background. Volunteers served meals, children played together, and local musicians filled the afternoon with hope. Victoria arrived quietly, no longer surrounded by assistants or luxury vehicles. She looked older, exhausted, and humbled by everything she had lost. Across the room, she noticed Elias helping children decorate backpacks for the upcoming school year. For several long moments, she stood silently, overwhelmed by regret. She finally approached with lowered eyes, no longer carrying the confidence that once intimidated boardrooms. She admitted that losing her empire hurt less than realizing. She had become someone incapable of recognizing goodness when it stood directly before her. Wealth had convinced her that appearances revealed value, but losing everything had shown her that character was the only fortune impossible to steal. Elias listened without anger. He believed forgiveness did not erase consequences, but it prevented bitterness from poisoning tomorrow. Instead of reminding her about the humiliation she had caused, he invited her to help distribute school supplies to children waiting excitedly across the hall. For the rest of the afternoon, Victoria handed backpacks to smiling children, whose gratitude required no billion-dollar balance sheet. Something inside her quietly changed. She discovered a peace that success had never delivered. Years later, people rarely remembered how much money Victoria once controlled. They remembered the woman who rebuilt her life by serving others instead of commanding them. They remembered the father who refused to let pride define his response to cruelty. Most of all, they remembered little Nora, whose innocent belief that kindness always wins became the invisible thread, connecting broken hearts to second chances. The greatest victories are rarely announced by stock markets or celebrated inside luxurious offices. They happen quietly inside ordinary people who choose compassion over revenge, humility over pride, and forgiveness over hatred. Money can build skyscrapers, but only kindness can build a life worth remembering. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share this video with your family and friends, and subscribe to Soulful. Tales 2, your support helps these inspiring stories reach people who may need hope today. A special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness is my greatest wealth." If you believe a good heart will always outshine money and power. As the sun slowly set across the city, Elias and Nora walked home hand in hand beneath a sky painted with gold and orange. They owned different treasures than most people chased. They carried love instead of pride, peace instead of fear, and kindness instead of arrogance. In the end, those invisible riches became the greatest fortune anyone could ever possess.